Hello, friends. My name is Michaela Daystar, and with me is Bronwen Logan and Carrie Varela, and together we are the Reiki Women podcast. We are feeling pretty good today because we are on the other side of our very first offering of the Embodying Reiki community of practice. So I just wanted to give ourselves a little appreciation and give our listeners appreciation who joined us for a really lovely circle of practice last night. We will be offering those circles every month on the first Sunday of the month. And so I'm feeling good after, launching that momentous new endeavor that we have been planning for some time. And there are many times in our life when we are launching something momentous, we are birthing something, you might say. And our topic today is really aligned with that because we wanted to circle back to a topic we've touched on in the past, which is our experiences of pregnancy, of birth, of child rearing as Reiki practitioners, and what we have brought into our parenting from our Reiki experiences and what we've brought into our Reiki from our parenting. I know in my experience, there's been a lot of cross-pollination of lessons learned and mistakes made inside those two parts of my life. And I think it's something valuable for us to reflect on from time to time. And so we are coming back to this topic fresh in this time. And so I'd love to turn it over to you to get us started.
Go, Carrie.
And by you, I don't know which one of you because we didn't decide.
You usually try to figure that out beforehand.
I know. Well, I always go first. Go on, Carrie.
Okay, all right, I'll go
The young
first.
kids.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a mom. My kiddos are 5 and 3 right now. My daughter's just about to turn 4, and so I feel like, well, Reiki has been with me the whole time. I've known Reiki. I studied Reiki probably first time back in 2009, so over, is that 14 years now, and so, I think that there is a pretty dramatic shift between, my life before Reiki and then my life after Reiki. And so sometimes I feel like I can't really relate to the two, but between Reiki and motherhood and that topic, I feel like Reiki really helped me be more connected to my body. So specifically in pregnancy, I felt very connected to what was going on internally to me, what was going on with the baby. I could feel so much movement. I really could notice and feel a lot of shifts when the baby was growing. And like sometimes I'd just be totally zonked of energy and I'd take a little nap or a little breather rest, and suddenly I felt bigger and I knew that my baby was growing inside of me. So um, I often gave myself Reiki throughout my pregnancies. It really helped with just the side effects and especially nausea. I figured it out on my second pregnancy. I kind of figured it out on the first, but then it really helped in the second. I figured out that if I really treated my head extensively, that it helped with nausea. And so and I actually received a few Reiki sessions, and after those Reiki sessions, I almost completely kicked nausea out of my pregnancy experience, which was pretty fortunate. I'm super grateful for that because that was a miserable side effect of pregnancy for sure. But nowadays, as my kids are a little bit older, I guess I was really impacted by a friend of mine in the healing circle in Colorado that I'm a part of. And she is a shamanic Reiki practitioner. And she came to Reiki because her mom became a Reiki master. And her mom kind of forcefully, I don't know what to say, but just gave her an attunement to Reiki when she was 12, without her knowledge or consent. But that experience of receiving Reiki in that way really opened her up psychically. And it kind of led her down this path of a healer. And that story always really sits with me in terms of how I relate to my kids and with Reiki, because I really feel like it's super important to let my children to lead. they're either whether they're receiving Reiki from me or just that giving them an opportunity to think for themselves, develop their own spirituality. All of those things are really important to me. And not to force things on my kids. I think that's important for me as a mom. I mean, we try to do it as much as we can, but I think some things they have to force, like, yes, you have to eat broccoli every once in a while and things like that. But I'm always really mindful of not providing Reiki to my kids or kind of forcing them to lay down or using that as a big part of, their health regimen. But I do find that kids are a lot like cats or dogs, is that if you kind of have like Reiki in your system, or you just did a self-treatment or gave a treatment to somebody, that kids and babies, they just like come to you and like just cling onto your skin. And so that's definitely my experience. My kids are very like lovey-dovey. And there's been times certainly when the kiddos are sick that I love giving them Reiki and feel like it's, that I just will have my hands near them or just supporting them and breathing deep with them and feeling energy flow between us, really driven by whatever my children's needs are. So not me like pushing Reiki on them, but I'm also really inspired by Kyoko Yamaguchi, and she's the one lineage of Reiki that survived in Japan. And in her book, or her son's book, Light on the Origins of Reiki, we talk extensively about growing up in a Reiki household and how she used Reiki for cuts and burns and scrapes and fevers and colds. And I think that's pretty incredible, to have Reiki as part of our households. I guess one more thing I can mention in that realm is that my son is autistic, and my husband actually was diagnosed on the spectrum as well. And so I really found that Reiki has been something I'm really mindful of in our home, helping me kind of be more aware of energy and how that might be impacting our mental health. And so using Reiki is just something to really calm the space, to calm myself when I'm dealing with, people or kids that are just like kind of crazed up and their nervous system is really amped up. Using techniques and skills within Reiki to calm my own energy, calm my own voice, and use that, to respond calmly to kids. But my son sometimes he'll like make large sounds and likes to kind of bang on things. And that is kind of challenging, but I know that it is something that's going on in his nervous system. And so always just trying to use my awareness of Reiki and energy in our home to help soothe and calm his nervous system.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds challenging. But
it's not easy.
Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah, I think that a number of the things you said there come to one point, which is that when we shine brightly, what happens. And that's what we're doing with the system of Reiki, is working on ourselves to allow that brightness to be there, to shine. And definitely, children are attracted to that, and animals, and you see the response to that. So the more that we work on ourselves, the more that we are that beautiful bright light. And I mean, so often I know, a baby will look at me and it'll just be like, and their eyes get big and they look at you, and you feel really like they see you, and I think it's so beautiful. And it's not a child, I know it might be, just on a train or whatever, but just that connection that we can make, and that they can see and know. And I do believe that the more that we work on ourselves, the more we are that. And it makes a difference just not just for those that we live with, but just everybody that we meet and interact with. Yeah, and I was just thinking also about what you said, how you work with kids, with it, like work with your kids. For me, it was very much a nighttime ritual, for example. So that was very much a conscious time of working with it. So shining bright is just us, life, right? And being Reiki, but when we consciously work with it in that way with kids, it's a beautiful nighttime ritual. I found, we'd always read a book. We'd then do a little bit of quiet time. In that quiet time, the child, it's like finding that balance before you head into sleep. So finding that place of just calmness and feeling good in your body, in your mind, in your heart, and being relaxed. So, if we are that, obviously we can support our children, or if we are working on that, yes, so then we're supporting our children in that. But consciously being in that space together is really important. I know we had another thing that my child really loved was listening to like guided meditations and that sort of thing to go to sleep. And they were specifically for children. But I think that the attraction from my child to that is because child was brought up with Reiki, and the idea that that's a great space to be in when we can let go, relax, and be open and balanced and calm. So knowing that space, I think, my child has always been attracted to that, actually. So my child's 23 now, and we were just talking about this before we started, just about our kids, and I was just saying, my child's not, would never call themselves a Reiki practitioner, I don't think, has been to lots of retreats and done lots of stuff, but it's very much, an individual who has their own identity and was searching for their own identity, like probably most of us are to some degree. And I think that having had that background of understanding the system of Reiki, I think has really and experiencing that what it means to be balanced and calm and whole, that has really supported them into adulthood, and is always something that they, like I said, I feel like that they're always attracted to, and are looking for, finding, and even though it might not be called, in my child's mind, it might not be called Reiki or whatever, but just that sensation and that feeling and knowing what it feels to feel good in yourself. And I feel great that I've been able to provide that, that's they know what it means, like I was brought up, I think I've said that before, but, in an alcoholic environment with a bipolar father, and I mean, so what do I know as something, is normal for me? So, what we create is a normal environment for our children, so that's something that I've had to, a challenge in my life to find what a different normal, I guess. So if we can provide for our children a normal environment, that there's nothing's normal, but you know what I'm saying, the environment that they consider to be normal, that actually is one that is positive and helpful and supportive and self-supportive, then we have done a great job at being parents, I think.
That's a really powerful jumping off point for me as I'm listening to both of your experiences. One of the difference in my journey with parenting and Reiki from yours is that I came to Reiki after both of my kids were born. I very much wish I could have had the experience of having Reiki in my life when I was pregnant. But alas, my older daughter was about 13 or 14 when I started practicing, and my younger daughter was about 3 or 4. And, I came to Reiki, as I think I've shared in other conversations, out of a crisis point in my life. And that was the ending of a abusive marriage, and really kind of our household being in a lot of chaos and disorder, kind of as you were just speaking to, right? It was, really that kind of household where there was just a lot of turmoil and a lot of anger and a lot of dis-ease, and the kids were absorbing all of that. And, it was the biggest work I had ever done in my life to break free of all of that. And, in that recovery period, Reiki came into my life and was, of great benefit, which is why it's still with me. And so, the impact on my parenting and on my kids of that had really nothing to do with treatments, or, neither of my kids have ever asked me for a hands-on treatment. I think the very first time with my younger daughter, I was practicing Tenohira, and she like fell asleep immediately, and she was in this really raucous, like difficult to sleep phase, and it was like magic. And I was like, it's a miracle. And then it never happened that way again. That was the only time. But, my older daughter, she was in a lot of chaos at the time. Like, she was really processing, and like her body was really working through all of the turmoil that our family had had. And she was just in a really rough time. And, this was just this weird hippie crap that her mom was doing. That's just like, whatever, mom. My younger daughter was, raised with it. It's much more, normalized for her, but, maybe similar to what you were sharing, Bronwen, it's just kind of more, in the air. It's just, my mom's job. But where it really, the impact is in what you were just speaking to, is the nature of the household. And really, comes down to a household that is guided by the precepts, right? Because I had to unlearn, a household that was very much guided by fear and anger, and was, absent compassion. It was absent a lot of gratitude. Not absent. That's not fair. It was challenging to find those things, and definitely led by fear and anger. And so to kind of strike out on a journey to rebuild a household that was not built on that foundation was, a momentous task. And here I was given this blueprint for how to do it, right? For what does that actually look like? What does a safe, trusting, healthy household and family feel like, look like? What is the behavior like, And it was, right there in the precepts. And in my early training with Reiki, there wasn't much emphasis on the precepts at all. The emphasis was primarily on Tenohira, but that still became the kind of background, for my practice. And what I found was, in relating with my kids, it wasn't so much about, well, let me do healing for you. It was about, let me keep control of my anger while we're in this interaction, right? Because they were both in very difficult stages, at this time, early in my, let's say the first 3 years or so that I was working with Reiki. Both of them were very challenging in very different ways. And so, I realized pretty quickly that the only thing I could really do, particularly with my older daughter, who was just rejecting absolutely everything that that I was trying to give to her, to help. The only thing I could do was to be different myself, was to, find different tools, different practices to be different, to be grateful, to be compassionate, to be grounded, to be not attached to anger and fear in our interactions as mother and child, in this tumultuous time. And to be really transparent with her about that, to say, hey, I'm really angry right now. I need to pause and I need to do a thing. And then I would do a practice right in front of her. And it was really awkward and kind of embarrassing sometimes. I remember doing this at the gas station one time. We were driving her to therapy, and she was just like, just did not want to go and was fighting me. And I was losing my temper, and I was starting to yell at her. And I was just like, I need to do a practice. I like paused and like did some breathing and did some tapping. I was doing a lot of EFT at the time. And I didn't want to do that in front of her because it felt embarrassing, and it felt like, she was looking at me like I was weird, and we're in a public place. But it was like, I cannot break this cycle that our family has been in if I don't visibly, actively, transparently behave differently, and explain to her why and how. What is the method that I'm using to be different? She might choose a different method, right? But demonstrating that there are methods, right? And we can take them on, and let's see how that actually impacts. Because in that moment, after doing that practice, my nervous system calmed down and I was able to talk to her instead of yell at her, and, also keep my boundaries. Like, yes, we are still going to therapy. And, and so, that's been a continuous progress. And, we're now 9 years later. And, it's interesting this topic is up because there's been some things that have happened this week that have kind of thrown into relief the difference between my household as it is now, which is me, my two kids that both still live with me. We have a housemaid who rents the spare rooms, and his daughter. And like, we've created this community that is safe, trusting, loving, compassionate, dynamic, like all of these things, calm, the communication is amazing. And, some things have happened this week that really have contrasted that and really brought back the way that it used to be. Not brought back as in that's what's happening, but showed us that image. And it's like, it's this moment of pausing and being in such gratitude to be able to see the difference and to be able to say, and to have a really honest, difficult conversation with my younger daughter about this. Like, here, this is how it was before, right? And you were too young to remember that, but that's how it was. And let's talk about how it is now and how we're going to preserve this community that we've built. And we weren't talking about Reiki. We're not like, well, we're going to sit around and do Reiki to preserve this, right? Or like, that's how we've gotten there, is because we've been doing Reiki. But the things that were being named were the things that I know to be inherent to the system of Reiki, right? We talked about, when anger comes up, this is how we handle it. When, that we approach each other with compassion, and we work on our self-compassion because we have to love ourselves before we can love each other. And, we talk about it in terms of the practical day-to-day. How do these practices and principles come alive in our life? And, just sitting with my kid who's 12 now, and just being able to inventory all of these like very practical, very day-to-day ways in which, this system that's been with us now for 9 years has helped to shape what is a very healthy and safe and loving and mature household. And, that's something that's really worth spending the time, spending the effort, and to build, but also to preserve. So, yeah.
That's incredible, Michaela. Oh, what a story! What a transformation! And you have every right to be so proud of cultivating and creating that for yourself and for your family. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful offering. I know for myself, I was thinking about this topic, and yesterday when you facilitated our circle, we went through this a little bit of a compassion practice, and for me, that was kind of a really important segue into both my inner child and the parent, this overworked parent. I feel like I'm kind of starting to come out of it, but I still feel a little bit in the trenches of motherhood. The challenges of raising young kids, because this is so hard when they're super young. And I don't think women have enough support, societal wise, community wise, even familial wise in our communities. And but for me, that compassion piece was a real segue into being able to really say to myself, this is hard. This isn't easy. And yet it's some of the most rewarding thing I get to do in my life. It's one of the most fulfilling things I get to do in my life, to be a mom. And my daughter right now, she's just she's the cutest thing. She's loves calling me her best friend, and so she's like, Mom, you're my best friend, right? And we want to do everything together because we're best friends. And so yesterday we had to make rainbow cat fairies together, and with pipe cleaners. And it wasn't just one, like every single person in the household needed one, like including Dad and the dog and the cat and our neighbor. And so it was a lot of crafting. And there's this internal shift that I always am trying to do when I'm parenting. It's like, how can I be more present, present to my child and what they need and what fosters their growth and their spirit, and to feel not ignored, but have that presence in their life, and to work on things like that really matter and they're important. And if it's just building a rainbow cat fairy, which actually, if I could shift my perspective, it was a big priority for my Sunday. I mean, that was a pretty cool thing to do. But there's a part of me that kind of has a war of wills of like what I want to do and what my kids are doing, and always having to balance that. But I know for myself, I think Reiki has really started, as a parent, has really forced me to start for myself, work on myself, give myself quality of time and self-care. And when I can do that, I can really be present to my kiddos. And I know there's times where I just haven't been able to do that work, and I feel pulled in 5 billion different directions, and my children's needs and everybody else's needs seem to go in front of my own, and it doesn't help a cohesive, safe, um, supportive, relaxed environment. And I think I often mention this to my students, my yoga students, and sometimes for Reiki clients. And it is really a core of my own self practice, is like come back into the me, who is me that's outside of all of the things that are on my plate, all of the giving and the doing that I do in my day to day. Like, how do I come back to myself? How do I see myself inside of all of that? Because a lot of those things, these external things, like things on my to-do list and all of the stresses of parenting, it's just easy to lose yourself in that. And so I feel super fortunate, that I have this at my fingertips. And I realize as well that I need more self-care than I probably give myself at this stage in my life. And I wish that wasn't so, but it's true. Like, I was realizing it took me like 2 full hours of some really good, solid self-care for myself yesterday, that I could really be more present and be there and serve my family, serve my family well, and not feel jaded or a little bit resentful about that, of how hard it is, to put them first over me. So.
Yeah. As you're talking, a word that I wrote down was resentful. Yeah. I think as a mum, not necessarily so much for fathers, but definitely for mothers, that's, making that time. And, I homeschooled for, until, I don't know, my child must have been 13 or something like that. So, I was running a business, writing, sometimes teaching, so I was trying to do everything and also homeschool a child. My husband wasn't really interested in that. So, that was totally on my back. And, very difficult to find any time for yourself and to actually be present for your child, and I have to be present. I have to be present. And that's when the resentfulness for me would come up for sure, and those feelings of just not knowing how you're going to do all of that. And I really understand, Carrie. It's an awful, awful lot when they're young. And even now, I often find, even just talking on the phone to my child, sometimes I think I'm not present, and really having to come back to that, be present, be there, and it's something, it doesn't feel, weirdly enough, it doesn't feel natural. And I think it's probably because we ask too much of ourselves to start with. We do have too much that we have to do. And, like for a male, I think that women will, I found for myself anyway, I'd say, oh, you take the time to do that, and, and I'll just sort of manage everything else, right? But I don't think a man's ever said that to me. Right? That sort of difference of experience of what that is, and so, that's to do with the role models that we have in our society. And what I was saying before about my child finding finding a space of normal for them. I don't think it means that they came from a perfect marriage, because they certainly didn't, but it's more the fact that just the ideas behind I guess I guess if I look at myself, I can only talk about myself, but trying to be the best person that I can be, and how I would do that. I think that is definitely being a role model for your child, and dealing with the resentment, working out how to work with that, and yeah, yeah, um, yeah.
It's such interesting territory we're going into on this conversation. For me, the roles were reversed, and therefore the resentment was reversed. So I was the one who worked, consistently full time, and my ex-husband, spent a lot of time, basically being head of household and raising our kids, and doing the domestic side of things, and did have a great deal of resentment around certain aspects of that. He chose certain aspects of it, and then also, and part of that was because, as a father in a realm that is typically held by women, he had a lot of difficulty, feeling like he had community, and there was just a lot of special things that were challenging about that for him that wouldn't have been for me. So that's interesting to see, the ways that resentment can show up differently, but around similar sorts of pressures. And I was kind of, I have to laugh because in our practice circle yesterday, one of the topics that we circled back to was our conversation about shame, and we gave the assignment of picking something that we feel some shame around, and sharing it with somebody, and like as a practice of the voice, kind of aerating that shame. And so I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to do my practice right now, which is that I don't like little kids. I am not a kid person, even a little bit.
Yeah.
I like my kids, right?
Yeah.
But that, when you're like staying present, and that struggle to like stay with the pipe cleaner unicorn cats, like personal nightmare. Like I want nothing to do with that kind of project. Honestly, I want to be doing my projects, right? And if my kid wants to do my projects, then they need to do it my way. And so I had a lot of struggle with like the little kid phase, because I'm not a little kid person, And so having, again, having this structure and this guidance system to help me stay present, right, in those moments when I would be rather doing anything else. And when my roommate first moved in, he's lived here about 2 years. I see him as this tremendous father, like so engaged with his kids, so much fun. Like they just have so much fun. They're over there laughing and making music all the time. So much fun. And I remember saying early on, like, man, I wish I was the kind of parent that you are, who just really loves and enjoys doing all this stuff that your little kid loves to do. His daughter was 5 at the time. And he goes, man, I don't love that stuff. I'm not into that stuff. I just have to do it, like I have to, like, I keep thinking this is the only shot I've got. Like, this is his only kid. He's like, I've got this one chance, and as much as I really would rather be doing my own projects and really do not normally like doing little kid stuff, like, this is the only chance I've got, and so I'm going to show up for it. And I'm just like, I remember just admiring that so much. And what he said to me was, I see that, I see you the same way, so he was confused by my question, or by my comment. And it just, really highlighted that, like, even though we might not feel like, oh, I'm not a little kid person, or this part of me is challenged, we can still show up with our full self, right? We can still be there and fill the role and do it really beautifully, even if we'd rather be doing something else. And it's this, like, it's kind of challenging, like the idea that we have to be perfect, and that it has to be, there's a model of a good parent. It's like, sometimes I feel like a terrible parent because I'd rather be doing anything but whatever little kid thing is happening, like I've never like thrown my kids like proper birthday parties because I'm like, I don't want to deal with all those little children. Like I like my children, I don't like those other children, So now I'm just telling on myself. But the point is that, having a practice like Reiki that can keep us, focused on what matters, which is compassion and gratitude and connection, can transcend all of that really, that stuff that just doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm not a little kid person. This is my one shot with these two people that I created. Like, this is my one chance to create a space where they get to thrive. Right. And that's an incredible honor, even if there are times when I would rather be doing something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say too that I think in this topic it's kind of polarizing, in general, because of course there's women out there who absolutely love to be parents and aren't and haven't been able to have children. And also, yeah, like you mentioned, Michaela, fathers who are stepping into women's traditional women's roles as raising children. I see that a lot happening at my kids' schools, and dads, stay-at-home dads, and people like that in my friendship circles and stuff like that. And so it's really exciting to see those shifts, but I can only imagine that it comes with a lot of maybe working through some of those resentments, a lot of challenge around working through gender identified roles in families. But I think what is really beautiful for my friends who don't have children is that they can give to themselves. And I think that that is almost unprecedented in the history of women, is like having the freedom to choose whether or not to have a family or not.
It's different.
And I feel like ancestrally or just energetically that there is a story of the ancestors in my family, or potentially, I do believe in past lives, so potentially the thought of like me carrying something from past lives, but that women, we just have so traditionally given so much of ourselves to other people. And so for my friends who don't have children and our listeners who maybe didn't even get this far into this episode, we also acknowledge you. And I think it's a powerful place to be in, is to not choose to have children and to give yourself the time, the energy that you would put into parenting, to give that back to yourself. And it's an incredible freedom filled choice. And so I'm always really like somewhat a little bit jealous of my friends who don't have children, because there's some points where I'm like, I'd love to be like, spending all these
you get the challenge to grow in a different way, and I think having children just pushes you through all these like boundaries that you put in front of yourself. It makes you do things that you never thought that you could. I'm not a kid person either, and I didn't know if I would have children, but I realized when I got older that it was something that I don't know. There was something in me that said, yes, I'd like to, but it wasn't, anyway, it was just sort of like that whole thing. I had no idea what I was heading into, put it that way. But, and the stages that those children go through, there are years, I think, where like at the, that teenage thing at the end there, Michaela, how old is your eldest, Michaela?
She's 24.
Oh, 24. Yeah. So yeah, there's a couple of years there were, very rocky, and I, you just got to sit back and learn to let go. There's so much to learn, so much that helps us to evolve as individuals. And for people who don't have kids, they can be involved in other people's kids, and if as well. And I think, that is great if we can expand that community out, because as you said, Carrie, community is we're way too tight at the moment with how we live, and so disconnected from others.
Well,
But
I think this is, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, there was just one tiny little thing that I want to say, and I'm not going to say anything more, but there was just one little thing that I just remembered when my kid was, I don't know, maybe 6 or something like that, being in the kitchen, and they did something, and I must have looked at my child with real deep love and presence, and I shone, right? And there was nothing else in that. And my child looked at me and said, "Do it again."
Oh, that's so cute.
Because, like Usui says, we heal with our eyes, right?
Right.
And we do, and it was just like, and I was like, "What? Do what again?" And then I thought, "Oh," and I could feel that feeling and that everything inside of me coming together into that beautiful ball of love, and just being there with that child. And I really always try to remember that, because I think, that is the way to be, isn't it? To be with people. It's beautiful. And that child taught me that. Mm.
I love that story. Yeah, I love that we're kind of landing at this place of community, and I really want to name that, the Western model of the nuclear family is really dysfunctional, and it's not the way that we are meant to raise children. And we need people without children, and we need, multiple types of families, and we need community around the raising of children. And part of why resentment exists and why things can be so difficult and why we think of parenting as such a lonely task sometimes is, I think largely because we've compartmentalized community in a lot of ways, right? It shows up in around activities that we do, as opposed to kind of the life that we have. And that's something that I've, been building here, and just really in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, intentionally building my home as a community space. And so there's 5 of us who live here. There's another friend who's going to move in soon, and we all run our businesses out of here. And so there's this constant flow of people through. And like whenever something is needed, like there's somebody available. And to be able to like model that for them as, young people growing up is really been important to me. And something that has always stuck with me, the author Elizabeth Gilbert has done a lot of writing about, her journey with relationships. She's the Eat, Pray, Love author. But her book Committed, which traces her relationship with marriage and her choice not to have children, is a really fascinating read. And one of the things, statistics and kind of data points that always stood out to me from that book was that all societies, and particularly healthy societies, have a certain percentage, minimum 25%, but healthy societies have about 30% of childless adults. And that is about the amount of people who are not responsible for their own children that are necessary to raise up the children, right? So in addition to the parents, we need 30% of the population present in the community in whatever way they are, whether or not they're directly helping, that are, creating that container, that space within which people grow and learn to be human. And that's just so profound to me. And I've seen that in my own life. There are about 5, people who've been in my life since I've been parenting, who are childless by choice and who have been essential in raising my kids. And just by their presence, right? And some of them very actively, taking my kids for weekends, and some of them more just by their presence in the space and the support that they give to me and the example that they give to my kids as of, functional adults who are, doing a good job out in the world. So I just wanted to name that, because I feel like any conversation about parenting is not complete if we don't acknowledge the necessity of community and, interrogate the ways in which, the nuclear family model that has been normalized in the West for quite some time, but I think the stranglehold on our culture that the nuclear family model has had for decades is starting to crack. I'm seeing so much more intergenerational living happening, so much more, co-housing situations, just seeing a lot more creativity around how people come together around, their lives in general, but certainly around child rearing. So I just wanted to name that. And certainly having at the center of it people who are practicing the system of Reiki, I'm going to just go ahead and call a bonus for any community that is forming. I recommend it. So, friends, I think that brings us to the end of our time for today. I'm really glad we decided to circle back to this topic. We debated a little, should we change it since we talked about parenthood before? But I feel like this was a really fresh and different conversation than the one we had before. So I'm really glad that we stayed with it. We would love to hear from you, dear listener, your experiences with child rearing in any form, however you are in relationship to that experience, including your own experience as a child being reared by parents and communities. We'd love to have conversation with you about that down in the chat. Reach out if you have anything that you want to share or ask, and there will be information down below about how you can join our next how you can join our next Embodying Reiki practice circle next month.
Hey,
Thank
and
you
I'm
so
hosting
much.
it.
And
Woohoo!
Bronwen is hosting it. It is her turn. We're going to circle around. Carrie will be hosting the next one, bringing back wisdom from her trip to Japan. I cannot wait. And it's going to be a good time. So find out about that below. And we will be with you again next week.